Hello and welcome here. My name is James, and in this video I'm going to show you how I made this wooden mug using hand tools. This was my first time trying something like this, and I had a lot of fun. A little while ago I picked up this piece of wood from a local man with a sawmill. I had thought of maybe using it for a narrow floating shelf, but I knew I'd have a lot of extra length, so I decided to use a piece off the end to make my mug. Well, first I cleaned up the surface of the piece with a hand plane and then got ready to draw the shape of the mug. I looked around the house to see if I could find a compass from an old math set so I could draw some perfect circles, but I couldn't find one. Instead, what I did is I found a mug about the same size that I wanted my mug to be and traced that onto the top of the piece. I needed to draw separate circles for the outside and the inside of the mug, and so what I did is I kind of held my pencil straight up and down one time going around the mug, and then I held my pencil at an angle the second time going around the mug, and this gave me one circle that was just a little bit smaller than the other circle. I knew I wanted to have a handle on the mug, so I took some time to sketch out where I wanted that to go. I didn't worry about details, I would do that later, but just wanted to have a general idea of where that would be. I thought about cutting the piece to rough size right away and working with a smaller piece of wood, but I decided to keep it intact while I hollowed out the mug. I thought it would give some extra stability and make it easier to clamp down securely. Now came the fun part, using the gouge to carve out the mug. I had a really fun time doing this. I bought this bent wood carving gouge off Amazon from a company called Beavercraft. It cost just under $30 Canadian when I bought it, and from my experience, it was well worth the money. I was pleasantly surprised by how sharp this was right out of the packaging. It advertises being very sharp, but pretty much all chisels make that same claim and rarely actually are. This gouge could slice cleanly through paper right out of the packaging. I have sharpening stones, but I didn't even have to use them. I did use my strop with the buffing compound every now and then throughout the process, but that was mainly to maintain the sharpness that was already there. I didn't have any experience using a gouge before this, but it was fairly intuitive. You start to get a feel pretty quickly of how the wood feels under the gouge in the different directions. So starting from the middle, I worked my way to the outside and in circles, and then just kept going deeper and deeper. There were some sections where I was working through the end grain of the wood and felt the gouge have far more resistance, and as I got deeper, there were other times where I felt a lot of resistance as I pried up to remove material. I backed off immediately when I felt this kind of pressure. I had read some reviews of people snapping the end of their gouge, and I can see how it could happen if you put too much force into prying it. So I tried not to take too much wood at once and just let the tool do the work. It took a while, but eventually I got the entire mug hollowed out to the depth that I wanted, and now it was time to cut the mug away from the rest of the piece of wood and shape it to actually look like a mug. If you have access to a bandsaw, there would be nothing wrong with using it at this point in the process. It would be much easier than what I ended up doing. I chose to stick with hand tools. I used my pole saw to cut off large chunks of wood around the mug. I made as many cuts as I could with the mug still attached to the rest of the piece, then I detached it completely. It looked like a big, clunky mug. At this point, it was a matter of using all the tools at my disposal to get the mug to final form. I used my saw, a spoke shave, a chisel, a pocket knife, and my gouge to carve away all the pieces that looked like they didn't belong. I don't have much to share here in terms of my technique. I was just making it up as I went along. But what I found is that if you keep removing small amounts of wood for a long enough period of time, eventually the mug will begin to take the shape you want. For the handle, I wanted to copy a style of wooden mugs that have 2 holes in the handle for your fingers. I had a drill bit from my bit and brace set that was the size that I wanted. I used my bit and brace to drill out the 2 holes in the handles. It was fun to use this bit and brace, but if I'm honest, I wasn't too pleased with the results. The bit I used wasn't very sharp and it left a lot of tear out in the holes that was difficult to smooth out later. After I drilled the holes, I continued to shape everything until it became more comfortable to hold, and it took the shape I was hoping for. At the end of the process, I took a good amount of time sanding the mug. I worked through the various grits of sandpaper, taking my time to get rid of all the rough spots. I sanded the inside and the outside. And finally, the mug looked the way that I hoped it would. I finished the mug with some butcher block oil. This gives it some moisture and will offer some protection. It also helps to bring out the natural beauty of the wood. I'm really happy with how this mug turned out. I definitely learned a lot in the process. The next time I make a mug, I'll definitely do a few things differently. The handle was the area that was the most challenging and the one I would give more thought to next time. But all that aside, I think the mug turned out nicely. I tested it to make sure it would actually work. I don't think this mug will be used very often to drink out of, but it's nice to know I could if I wanted to. This gouge is definitely going to show up in future projects, so be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any of them. I think I'm going to try some sort of bowl next and see how that goes. Well, thanks for taking the time to watch the video. I hope you enjoyed it. Until next time, take care.